The stars had never seemed so cold. Ambassador Kalen Driscoll stood at the window of her quarters on Axis Prime, the great neutral station where all species of the galactic Concord gathered to discuss matters of peace and trade. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much in her 53 years of life. Behind her, the holographic display showed images that made her stomach turn. Fire, death, an entire world burning. Valor Prime was gone. 3 billion souls had died in a single night, and somehow, impossibly, the evidence pointed to humanity. Kalen pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. Earth was somewhere out there, far beyond the visible stars. Her home, her people, the same people who were now being called murderers and monsters by every species in the galaxy. Ambassador Driscoll. The voice came from behind her. It belonged to her aide Marcus Chen, a young man with a serious face and quick mind. The tribunal has called for you. They want you to appear within the hour. Kalen did not turn around. And what happens if I refuse? Then they will send soldiers to bring you. The Concord is not asking, Ambassador. They are demanding. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In 300 years of membership in the Galactic Concord, humanity had worked hard to prove itself worthy. They were the youngest species in the Alliance. The others had traveled among the stars for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. Humanity had always been seen as children playing at the table of adults, tolerated but not truly respected. Now they were seen as something far worse. Prepare my formal attire, Kalen said quietly. If humanity is to be judged, we will face our accusers with dignity. The walk to the tribunal chamber was the longest of Kalen's life. The corridors of Axis Prime were usually filled with beings of every shape and size, talking and trading and living their lives in peace. Today, those same beings stopped and stared as she passed. Some whispered to each other in languages she did not understand. Others simply watched with cold eyes full of hatred. A Valorian child stood near one of the viewing ports. His skin glowed with the soft blue light that was natural to his species. When he saw Kalen, he began to cry. His mother pulled him close and looked at the human ambassador with an expression of pure grief and rage. Kalen wanted to stop. She wanted to tell him that humanity had done nothing wrong, but the words would not come. What could she possibly say to a mother who believed that humans had killed everyone she ever loved? The tribunal chamber was a massive circular room at the heart of Axis Prime. Seats rose in great rings around a central platform where the accused would stand. Representatives from all 12 elder species of the Concord filled those seats today. Kalen could see the towering forms of the Morvathi, whose bodies were made of living crystal. She could see the small and quick Yaneshi, who communicated through rapid patterns of color across their skin. She could see the ancient Drelmori, the beings of pure energy contained in mechanical shells, and she could see the Krethvani. The Krethvani were perhaps the most powerful species in the Concord. They had smooth gray skin, long limbs, and faces that seemed to show no emotion at all. Their ambassador, High Chancellor Morvath, sat in the highest seat of all. His black eyes watched Kalen as she stepped onto the central platform. Ambassador Kalen Driscoll of the Terran Federation, announced the tribunal speaker, a Morvathi whose crystal body rang like a bell when she spoke. You have been called before this body to answer for the crime of genocide. 3 days ago, the homeworld of the Valorian people was attacked without warning. Every living being on that world was killed. The evidence suggests that this attack was carried out by vessels of the Earth Defense Coalition. How does humanity respond to these charges? Kalen stood straight and tall. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Humanity denies these charges completely. We did not attack Valor Prime. We had no reason to do so. The Valorian people were our friends and trading partners. We are as horrified by this tragedy as anyone in this chamber." A sound rose from the seats around her. It was something between a hiss and a growl, the combined anger of a dozen species expressing their disbelief. Lies. The word came from the Valorian section of the chamber. High Mourner Sivithra, the leader of the Valorian survivors, rose to her feet. She was beautiful in the way that all Valorians were beautiful, with skin that glowed like starlight and eyes that shifted through every color of the rainbow. But those eyes were now filled with tears, and her glow had dimmed to almost nothing. "I have seen the evidence," Sivithra continued, her voice breaking with grief. "Human ship signatures were detected near our world before the attack. Human genetic material was found in the biological weapons that killed my people. Human military codes were used in the communications that jammed our defense systems. How can you stand there and deny what is so clearly true?" Kaelin felt her heart breaking, but she could not show weakness now. "High Mourner, I understand your pain. I cannot imagine what you and your people are feeling. But I swear to you, on my own blood and the blood of every human who has ever lived, we did not do this. Someone is trying to make it look like we did. Someone wants you to blame us for a crime we did not commit." "Convenient words," said another voice. This one belonged to High Chancellor Morvith of the Crethvani. He spoke slowly and carefully, each word falling like a stone into still water. "The evidence against humanity is overwhelming. Perhaps the ambassador would like to explain how human ships came to be near Vela Prime on the night of the attack." "I cannot explain it," Kaelin admitted. "I do not know. But I do know that our ships were not responsible. Our military records show that no Earth Defense Coalition vessels were anywhere near Valorian space." "Records can be altered," Morvith said smoothly. "Lies can be told. But the dead cannot speak falsely. 3 billion Valorians cry out for justice. Will this tribunal deny them?" The chamber erupted in noise. Voices shouted for punishment, for revenge, for war against the human monsters who had committed such an unspeakable crime. Kaelin stood alone on the platform, surrounded by hatred from every direction. She tried to speak, to defend her people, but her words were drowned out by the roar of anger. She looked up at the faces of the beings who had been humanity's partners and friends for 3 centuries. She saw no friendship there now, only rage and fear and the terrible desire for someone to blame. The tribunal speaker called for order. Slowly, the noise died down. "The tribunal will now vote," the speaker announced, "on the charge of genocide against the Valorian people. How does each species cast their judgment?" One by one, the representatives spoke. "Guilty," said the Morathi. "Guilty," said the Yenishi. "Guilty," said the Dralmori. Every species voted the same way. Even those who had been closest to humanity, who had traded with them and learned from them and welcomed them into the Concord, voted guilty. The evidence was simply too strong. The emotions were simply too raw. No one was willing to stand with the accused. When the final vote was cast, the chamber fell silent. "By unanimous decision of the Galactic Concord," the speaker announced, "the Terran Federation is found guilty of genocide against the Valorian people. The punishment shall be absolute." Kaelin felt the words hit her like physical blows. "All human vessels will be confined to the Sol system effective immediately. Any human ship found beyond the boundary of the Oort cloud will be destroyed without warning. All trade agreements with human worlds are hereby terminated. All human citizens currently residing in Concord space will be returned to Sol within 30 standard days. The Terran Federation is expelled from the Galactic Concord and will have no contact with civilized species until such time as this tribunal determines otherwise." The chamber erupted in cheers. The other species celebrated the punishment of the monsters who had killed an entire world. Kaelin stood frozen on the platform, unable to move, unable to breathe. It was over. 300 years of work, of building relationships, of proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. All of it was over in a single moment. Guards approached the platform. They were Krethvani soldiers, tall and strong and emotionless. They took Kaylin by the arms and began to lead her away. As she walked through the cheering crowd, something made her look up at the Krethvani section of the chamber. High Chancellor Morvis was watching her go. And for just one moment, the corners of his thin mouth curved upward in a smile. Then it was gone, replaced by the same blank expression he always wore. But Kaylin had seen it. She knew what she had seen. That was not the face of someone who had just witnessed justice being served. That was the face of someone who had just won a game that no one else knew they were playing. The journey back to Seoul took 3 weeks. Kaylin was kept in a small room on a Concorde transport ship, treated not as a diplomat, but as a prisoner. She was given food and water, but little else. No one spoke to her. No one answered her questions. She was already being erased from galactic society. She spent those weeks thinking, going over everything that had happened, every piece of evidence that had been presented against humanity. The more she thought, the more certain she became. Someone had framed them. Someone with the technology to copy human ship signatures. Someone with access to human genetic material. Someone who understood how to forge military communications. Someone who had wanted humanity out of the way badly enough to murder 3 billion innocent people. And someone who had smiled when the verdict was announced. When the transport reached the edge of the Sol system, Kaylin was transferred to a human vessel that had been waiting at the quarantine line. Captain Rodriguez, a young officer with tired eyes, greeted her at the airlock. "Ambassador," he said quietly, "welcome home." Kaylin looked out the viewport at the distant sun of humanity's birth. "It doesn't feel like home anymore, Captain. It feels like a prison. What happened out there?" "We've been getting reports, but nothing makes sense. They're saying we destroyed Vela Prime. That's insane." "It is insane," Kaylin agreed. "And it's also a lie. We've been framed, Captain. Someone wanted us removed from the galactic stage, and they were willing to kill billions to make it happen." Rodriguez stared at her. Who would do something like that? Kaylin thought of that smile. That cold, triumphant smile on High Chancellor Morvis's face. "I have my suspicions, but suspicions aren't proof. And right now, no one in the galaxy would believe us even if we had proof." The ship began its long journey into the Sol system. Behind them, the quarantine line was already being established. Concorde vessels were taking up positions to ensure that no human ship ever left again. They were surrounded by enemies who wanted nothing more than to see humanity suffer and die. "What do we do now?" Rodriguez asked. Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Earth and Mars and the colonies on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. She thought about the 8 billion humans who were about to learn that they were now the most hated species in the galaxy. She thought about the children who would grow up believing they were monsters simply because they were human. And she thought about justice. "Now we survive," she said at last. "We survive, and we learn, and we grow stronger. The galaxy thinks this is the end of humanity. They think they've broken us. But they don't understand what humans are capable of when we're pushed to the edge. And then what?" Kaylin turned to face the young captain. Her eyes were hard, but deep within them burned a fire that would not be put out. "And then we find the truth. We find proof of who really destroyed Vela Prime, and we make them answer for what they've done. Not just for the 3 billion Valorians who died. Not just for the reputation they stole from us. But for every human child who will grow up in a cage because of their lies." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That could take years. Decades, even. Then it takes years. It takes decades. Humanity has never been good at giving up, Captain. We didn't become a star-faring species by accepting the limits others placed on us. We won't accept these limits either. The ship continued its journey inward, toward Earth, toward home, toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the stars that humanity had once explored grew smaller and smaller until they were just points of light in an endless darkness. But Kaylin did not despair. She had seen the truth in that moment of carelessness, in that smile that should never have been. She knew now that there was something rotten at the heart of the galactic concord, something that had been willing to commit the ultimate crime to eliminate a rival. The Krethvani thought they had won. They thought humanity was finished. They were wrong. In the weeks and months that followed, news spread across human space. People learned that they were now prisoners in their own solar system. They learned that the galaxy believed them to be murderers of the worst kind. They learned that everything their ancestors had worked for over 3 centuries was gone. Some people gave in to despair. Some demanded that humanity build weapons and fight back, even if it meant certain death. Some simply could not believe what had happened and refused to accept it. But slowly, quietly, something else began to happen. Leaders from every human world and station gathered for a secret meeting on Mars. Kaylin was there, no longer an ambassador, but now something more. She had become a symbol of what had been done to humanity and of the determination to set things right. "We cannot fight the entire galaxy," said Admiral Yuki Tanaka, commander of Earth's defense fleet. "We don't have the ships or the weapons. If we try, we will be destroyed." "I'm not suggesting we fight," Kaylin replied. "Not yet. Not directly. What I'm suggesting is something much harder. I'm suggesting we survive. We build, we prepare, and we wait. Wait for what?" asked Prime Minister Hassan of the Martian colonies. "Wait for our chance. The beings who framed us made one mistake. They thought that destroying our reputation would be enough. They thought we would tear ourselves apart with despair and anger. They don't understand that humans become most dangerous when we have nothing left to lose." She stood and looked at the faces of the leaders gathered around her. These were the people who would guide humanity through its darkest hour. These were the people who would determine whether their species survived or died. "We have been caged," Kaylin said. "We have been blamed for crimes we did not commit. The galaxy has turned its back on us. But we will not break. We will not beg. We will not give them the satisfaction of watching us destroy ourselves." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Instead, we will become something new, something stronger, something that will make them regret the day they decided to make enemies of humanity. They called us murderers. They called us monsters. One day, we will stand before them again. And on that day, the truth will come out. On that day, they will learn that blood is stronger than lies." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the leaders began to nod. They understood. The road ahead would be long and hard. There would be suffering and sacrifice. Many of them might not live to see the end of it. But they were human, and humans did not give up. The meeting ended with a single decision. A new organization would be created, hidden from the galaxy, dedicated to a single purpose: discovering the truth and preparing humanity for the day when that truth could be revealed. They called it the Prometheus Initiative, named after the ancient god who had stolen fire from the heavens and given it to humanity. And as the leaders departed to begin their secret work, Kaylin Driscoll stood alone on the red surface of Mars, looking up at the stars she could no longer visit. "We'll be back," she whispered to the cold and distant lights. "And when we return, you'll learn what happens when you blame the wrong species for your crimes." The wind carried her words away into the thin Martian air. But the promise remained, burning in her heart like a fire that would never go out. Humanity's exile had begun, but it would not last forever. Nothing ever did. 15 years passed behind the quarantine line. The galaxy watched through surveillance drones that circled the edge of the Sol system like hungry vultures. They saw what they expected to see. Abandoned space stations drifting in the darkness. Ships that no longer moved, their engines cold and dead. A species slowly dying, torn apart by shame and starvation. The Concorde's reports were filled with satisfaction. Humanity was paying for its crimes. The monsters who had destroyed Vela Prime were getting exactly what they deserved. In a few more years, perhaps a few more decades, the human problem would solve itself. The reports were lies, not lies created by the humans, but lies that the watching drones believed because they saw only what they were meant to see. Every abandoned station, every dead ship, every sign of collapse had been carefully placed for the watchers to find. The real humanity was somewhere else entirely. Director Kaylin Driscoll stood in the command center of Prometheus Base, buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Mars. She was 68 years old now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with years of stress and determination. But her eyes still burned with the same fire they had held on the day of the verdict. "Report," she said to the room full of officers and scientists who worked around the clock to prepare humanity for its return. Admiral Tanaka, now much older but still sharp as a blade, pulled up a holographic display. "The 7th Fleet completed construction yesterday. That gives us 700 combat-ready vessels, all equipped with the new drive systems. Independent jump capability? Fully operational. We don't need their gates anymore. Our ships can go anywhere in the galaxy without asking permission." Kaylin nodded with satisfaction. This was perhaps their greatest achievement. The Galactic Concorde controlled travel between the stars through a network of jump gates. Without access to those gates, a species was trapped in their home system. That was why the quarantine had been so effective. Humanity couldn't leave because they had no way to travel faster than light on their own. At least that was what the galaxy believed. In the first years after the quarantine, human scientists had studied every piece of alien technology they had acquired during their 3 centuries in the Concorde. They had learned secrets that the elder species thought were impossible to discover. They had built things that the galaxy believed could not be built. The independent jump drive was just one example. There were many others. "What about the intelligence network?" Kaylin asked. A woman with short red hair and tired eyes stepped forward. Her name was Sarah Chun, and she was the director of human intelligence operations. She had spent the last decade cultivating contacts among the species that the Concorde had forgotten or abused. "We have assets on over 40 worlds now," Sarah reported. "The Krethvani have made a lot of enemies over the years. Former slaves, species they denied membership in the Concorde, political dissidents who questioned their authority. They all whisper to us now. And the evidence?" Sarah's expression changed. For the first time in years, she almost smiled. "We have it, Director. The complete picture. Everything we need to prove what the Krethvani did." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. This was the moment they had worked toward for 15 years. The moment when the truth finally became clear. "Show me," Kaylin said. Sarah activated a new display. Documents and images and recordings filled the air around them. The evidence told a story of monstrous calculation and cold-blooded murder. The Krethvani had seen humanity as a threat. Not an immediate threat, but a future one. Humans were too adaptable, too creative, too good at learning and growing. In another century or two, they might have become powerful enough to challenge Krethvani dominance of the Concorde. So the Krethvani had decided to eliminate the threat before it could develop. They had spent decades preparing. Their agents had collected human genetic material from black market medical facilities across the galaxy. Their engineers had studied human ship designs and learned how to copy their signatures. Their specialists had broken into Earth Defense Coalition databases and stolen military communication codes. And then they had attacked Valor Prime. The weapons they used were biological, designed to kill Valorians and only Valorians. They had seeded those weapons with human DNA so that any investigation would find evidence of human involvement. They had masked their ships with human signatures. They had sent false communications using human codes. 3 billion innocent Valorians had died so that the Krethvani could frame their rivals. Kaelin watched the evidence with a face of stone. She had suspected this truth for 15 years. She had known, in her heart, what the Krethvani had done. But seeing the proof laid out before her still made her want to scream with rage. Where did this come from? She asked. Multiple sources, Sarah replied. But the most important one is a Krethvani defector, a scientist named Vel Shira who helped manufacture the false evidence. Her conscience eventually broke her. She couldn't live with what she had done. Can we trust her? I believe so. She came to us 5 years ago, at great personal risk. The Krethvani would kill her slowly if they ever found out. She has nothing to gain by lying. Kaelin considered this. A defector was valuable, but also dangerous. The Krethvani might have sent her as a double agent, feeding humanity false information. But Sarah was good at her job. If she believed Velshira was genuine, that counted for a lot. What does Velshira want in return for her help? Protection. A chance to start over. And something else. Sarah paused. She wants humanity to promise that when the truth comes out, we won't destroy her species the way they tried to destroy us. She wants us to be better than them. The room was quiet for a long moment. Everyone was thinking about the 15 years of exile and suffering. The children who had grown up believing they were monsters. The old people who had died never knowing if their species would survive. The constant fear and hunger and despair that it would be so easy to want revenge. So easy to dream of Krethvani worlds burning the way Valor Prime had burned. We will be better than them, Kaelin said finally. That was always the plan. We're not seeking revenge. We're seeking justice. There's a difference. Admiral Tanaka spoke up. Some people won't see it that way, Director. When the truth comes out, there will be voices calling for war, for total destruction of the Krethvani. Those voices will be wrong. The Krethvani leadership committed this crime, not the Krethvani people. We will hold the guilty responsible, not the innocent. That's what separates us from them. Kaelin turned to face the entire room. These were the people who had worked in secret for 15 years, sacrificing everything to prepare humanity for this moment. They deserve to understand why. The galaxy already believes we're capable of genocide, she said. If we prove them right by destroying the Krethvani, we become the monsters they think we are. But if we expose the truth and demand justice rather than revenge, we become something else. We become the species that survived the worst injustice in galactic history and still chose to be honorable. She let that sink in before continuing. That's how we win. Not just this fight, but the future. When the truth comes out, the Concord will have to face what they did to us. They voted unanimously to condemn an innocent species. They watched us suffer for 15 years and celebrated our pain. If we respond with grace and justice, they'll have to live with that shame forever. And more importantly, they'll have to respect us. Admiral Tanaka nodded slowly. You're playing a longer game than I realized, Director. I've had 15 years to think about it. Revenge is satisfying for a moment. Justice lasts forever. The meeting continued for several more hours. They discussed timing and tactics, how to reveal the truth, and what to do when the galaxy finally listened. It was decided that they needed to wait a little longer. The new fleet had to be fully tested. The intelligence network had to be completely secure. Everything had to be perfect. But the end was finally in sight. After the meeting, Kalen walked through the corridors of Prometheus Base. The underground facility was vast, home to thousands of people who worked and lived in secret. There were laboratories where scientists developed new technologies, training centers where soldiers prepared for battles that might never come, schools where children learned about a galaxy they had never seen. She stopped at a window overlooking one of the hydroponic farms that fed the base. A group of young people were working among the plants, laughing and talking as they harvested vegetables. They had been born after the quarantine. They had never known any life except this one, hidden beneath the surface of Mars. Director Driscoll? Kalen turned to see a young woman approaching. Kalen turned. The intern turned as a Jangon turned to see a young woman approach. She was perhaps 20 years old, with dark hair and eyes that seemed familiar somehow. My name is Maya Rodriguez, the young woman said. I don't know if you remember, but you knew my father, Captain David Rodriguez. He was the one who brought you home after the verdict. Kalen smiled softly. I remember him. He was a good man. A good officer. He died 5 years ago. Radiation exposure from working too close to the solar collectors. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Maya shook her head. It's okay. A lot of people have died in the past 15 years. My father always said it was worth it. He believed in what we're doing here. He believed that one day the truth would come out. He was right. The truth will come out soon. Maya's eyes widened. Really? You mean we're actually going to... I can't give you details. But yes, the day we've been preparing for is almost here. The young woman was silent for a moment, processing this. Then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin with a determination that reminded Kalen powerfully of her father. I want to help, Maya said. Whatever you need. Whatever I can do. I want to be part of it. Kalen studied her for a moment. The young people of Prometheus Base were humanity's future. They had grown up in exile, but they had also grown up with purpose. They knew what they were fighting for. They knew what was at stake. Report to Admiral Tanaka tomorrow, Kalen said. Tell him I sent you. We'll find a place for you. Maya's face lit up with a fierce joy. Thank you, Director. I won't let you down. She hurried away, practically running in her excitement. Kalen watched her go with a mixture of hope and sadness. These young people would carry the burden of revealing the truth. Some of them might die doing it, but they were willing to take that risk because they believed in something larger than themselves. That was what made humanity dangerous. Not their technology or their weapons. Their ability to believe in a cause and sacrifice everything for it. The months that followed were filled with final preparations. The fleet completed its training exercises, learning to work together as a single unit. The intelligence network confirmed and reconfirmed the evidence against the Krethvani. The hidden bases across the solar system prepared for the possibility of attack. And in a small secure room deep within Prometheus Base, Kalen recorded a message. She sat in front of a camera, wearing the formal clothes of an ambassador for the first time in 15 years. Her face was calm, her voice steady, but her eyes burned with cold fire. Citizens of the Galactic Concord, she began. 15 years ago, you condemned humanity for a crime we did not commit. You watched us suffer and called it justice. You believed we were monsters because that was easier than questioning the evidence you were given. She paused, letting the words sink in. Today, the truth will be revealed. Today, you will learn who really destroyed Valor Prime. Today, you will discover that the greatest crime in galactic history was not committed by humanity, but against humanity. The message continued, laying out the evidence piece by piece. The Krithvani conspiracy. The stolen genetic material, the forged signatures and communications. Everything that Sarah Chun and her agents had gathered over 15 years of patient, dangerous work. We have not forgotten what was done to us, Kalen said near the end of the message. We have not forgiven, but we have also not allowed ourselves to become what you accused us of being. We did not build weapons of genocide during our exile. We built ships and technology and a new society. We built a future. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes intense. You caged us for crimes we did not commit. You watched us starve and called it justice. Now we have broken your cage. Now we have the power to do to you what you did to us. But we will not, because that is not who we are. The final words of the message were the ones she had been waiting 15 years to speak. To the Krethvani leadership, you thought you had destroyed us. You thought your lies would bury the truth forever. You were wrong. Blood is stronger than lies. The dead of Vela Prime cry out for justice, and justice is what they will have. To the rest of the Concord, you have a choice to make. Stand with the liars who murdered 3 billion innocent people. Or stand with the species you wrongly condemned. We will be waiting at the edge of our prison. Come see what humanity built while you weren't watching. She held the camera's gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Message ends. The recording was stored and prepared for transmission. It would be sent at exactly the right moment, broadcast simultaneously across every world in the Concord. There would be no way to stop it, no way to silence it. The truth was finally ready to be told. On the day of the transmission, Kalen stood on the bridge of the TSS Prometheus, the flagship of humanity's secret fleet. Around her, 700 ships held formation in the darkness beyond the Oort cloud. They were just past the quarantine line, visible to the Concord's surveillance drones for the first time in 15 years. All ships report ready, Director, Admiral Tanaka reported. Kalen looked at the view screen. Somewhere out there, the surveillance drones were sending frantic messages back to their masters. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had not died in exile. Humanity had evolved. Begin transmission, she ordered. The message went out, carried on frequencies that could not be blocked, reaching every world in the Concord within hours. Kalen imagined the faces of the beings who would receive it. The shock, the disbelief, the growing horror as they realized what they had done. And in the Krethvani capital, she imagined High Chancellor Morvith receiving the message too. She imagined his cold black eyes watching as his carefully constructed lies crumbled to dust. It's done, Admiral Tanaka said quietly. No going back now. Kalen shook her head. There was never any going back. There was only forward. She looked at the stars ahead of them. Stars that had been denied to humanity for 15 years. Stars that were now within reach again. Now we wait, she said. We wait for the galaxy to decide what kind of future it wants. One built on lies and murder, or one built on truth and justice. The fleet held its position in the darkness. The message spread across the cosmos like wildfire. And somewhere in the distance, the balance of power began to shift. Humanity's exile was over. The reckoning had begun. The Grand Convocation was the most important event in the history of the Galactic Concord. For 10,000 years, the elder species had maintained peace and order across the stars. Now they gathered on Axis Prime to celebrate that achievement, to congratulate themselves on their wisdom and power. Every species sent their greatest leaders. Every world contributed to the festivities. The station had been decorated with lights and colors from 100 different cultures. Music from 12 different traditions filled the corridors. It was a celebration of unity and civilization. Humanity, of course, was not invited. The murderers were still locked away in their prison, slowly dying as the galaxy had always known they would. Their absence was barely noticed. After 15 years, most beings had stopped thinking about humans entirely. High Chancellor Morvith of the Krethvani stood before a mirror in his private quarters, preparing for the keynote address he would give that evening. He adjusted the ceremonial robes that marked his status as the most powerful being in the Concord. His reflection stared back at him with cold black eyes. Everything had gone according to plan. The humans were destroyed. The Valorian territories had been divided among the Concord's members, with the largest share going to Krethvani corporations. The evidence of his crimes had been buried so deep that no one would ever find it in another generation. No one would even remember that humanity had existed. Morvith allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. It had been a masterwork of manipulation. The death of 3 billion Valorians was regrettable, of course, but necessary. Sacrifices had to be made for the greater good of the Krethvani people. History would judge him as a visionary who had eliminated a threat before it could become dangerous. A chime sounded at his door. "Enter," he said. His aide, a young Krethvani named Thevrol, stepped into the room with a strange expression on his face. "High Chancellor, there's something you need to see." "Can it wait?" "I'm preparing for the address." "No, High Chancellor, it cannot wait." Something in the aide's voice made Morvith turn around. Thevrol was pale, his normally steady hands trembling. That was unusual. The young Krethvani had been selected for his unshakable calm. "What is it?" Thevrol activated a holographic display. An image appeared in the air between them. It showed a face that Morvith had not seen in 15 years. A human face. Female, with gray hair and eyes that burned with cold fire. This transmission began broadcasting across all frequencies approximately 10 minutes ago, Thevrol said. "We have been unable to block it. It is being received on every world in the Concord simultaneously." Morvith stared at the image. He knew this woman. Ambassador Kaylin Driscoll. He had watched her be led away in restraints 15 years ago. He had smiled as she was dragged off to die with the rest of her species. But she wasn't dead. She was very much alive. And she was speaking. "Today, the truth will be revealed," the recording was saying. "Today, you will learn who really destroyed Vela Prime. Today, you will discover that the greatest crime in galactic history was not committed by humanity, but against humanity." Morvith felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. "Turn it off," he said. "I cannot, High Chancellor. As I said, we have been unable to block it. The transmission is using frequencies and encryption methods that our systems cannot counter." The recording continued. Documents appeared on the screen. Communications between Krethvani military officers ordering the attack on Vela Prime. Laboratory footage showing Krethvani scientists inserting human DNA into biological weapons. Financial records tracking the purchase of Valorian territories after the genocide. Each piece of evidence was another nail in a coffin that Morvith had. Thought was buried forever. "This is fabricated," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. "The humans have created false evidence to save themselves." "High Chancellor." Thevrol hesitated. "I recognize some of these communications. I helped transmit them myself 15 years ago. I was told they were routine military exercises." Morvith turned on his aide with fury in his black eyes. "You will speak of this to no one. Do you understand?" "No one." But it was already too late. The transmission was playing across the entire station. It was playing across the entire galaxy. Every being in the Concord was watching the same evidence, hearing the same truth, and then a new face appeared on the screen. This one was also Krethvani, a female with features that marked her as a scientist. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her words were clear. "My name is Velshira. she said. I was a researcher in the Krethvani Special Projects Division. For 3 years, I helped manufacture the evidence that was used to frame humanity for the destruction of Valor Prime. Morvith felt the blood drain from his face. He knew Velshira. She had been one of his most talented scientists. She had disappeared 8 years ago, and he had assumed she was dead. I cannot live with my guilt any longer, Velshira continued. I helped murder 3 billion innocent people. I helped destroy the reputation of an entire species. I did these things because I was ordered to, because I was afraid, because I told myself it was for the good of my people. But there is no good that can come from such evil. She looked directly into the camera, her black eyes filled with tears. To the Valorian people, I am sorry. No words can make up for what was done to you. But I can at least tell you the truth. Your world was not destroyed by humans. It was destroyed by my people. By the Krethvani. By me. The transmission ended with those words, replaced by the face of Kaelin Driscoll once more. Come see what humanity built while you weren't watching, she said. And then she gave coordinates. The edge of the quarantine line. The boundary of humanity's prison. Morvith stood frozen for a long moment. Then he began to move with desperate speed. Contact the military, he ordered. Teverall. Tell them to prepare the fleet. We need to destroy the human ships before anyone can verify this evidence. Chancellor, I don't think. Do it now. But it was already too late for that to dot. The grand convocation had become chaos. Beings of every species filled the corridors of Axis Prime, shouting and arguing and demanding answers. The transmission had played on every screen in the station, and no one could ignore what they had seen. High Mourner Sivithra of the Valorians was pushing through the crowd. Her bioluminescent, skin flickering with colors that no one had ever seen before. Rage, grief, betrayal. Her people had been murdered. And for 15 years, she had blamed the wrong species. She found the Krethvani delegation trying to retreat to their ships and block their path. Where do you think you're going? She demanded that the Krethvani ambassador, who had taken Morvith's place at the celebration, tried to maintain his composure. This is clearly a human trick. We are returning to our homeworld to investigate these false accusations. False? Sivithra's voice rose to a scream. I saw the evidence. I saw the communications. I saw one of your own scientists confessing to the murder of my world. The evidence was manufactured. By who? The humans? The same humans you told us were too primitive to forge such sophisticated technology? The same humans you said could barely maintain their own ships. Sivithra was trembling with fury. You told us they were simple. You told us they were weak. And now you expect us to believe they created evidence this complex from inside a prison. Other beings were gathering around them now. The Morvathi, the Yinishi, the Drelmori, all the species who had voted to condemn humanity 15 years ago. All the species who were now facing the possibility that they had made a terrible mistake. We need to investigate, said a Morvathi representative, her crystal body ringing with uncertainty. We cannot simply accept this transmission at face value. Then let us investigate, Sivithra shot back. Let us go to these coordinates the humans have provided. Let us see for ourselves what they have built. Let us examine the evidence in detail. That would be unwise, the Krethvani ambassador said quickly. The humans may be planning an ambush. We should send a military fleet first to ensure our safety. Send a fleet to do what? Destroy the evidence before anyone can verify it? Sivithra turned to face the crowd. Listen to me, all of you. The Krethvani are afraid. They know what we will find if we investigate. They know the truth will destroy them. The crowd murmured in agreement. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were already beginning to grow. Chancellor Morvith arrived at the scene just as Sivithra was finishing her speech. He had changed out of his ceremonial robes into more practical clothing, and his face was set in an expression of calm authority. "Citizens of the Concord," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd with practiced ease. "I understand your confusion and concern. The transmission we all witnessed was disturbing, but we must not allow ourselves to be manipulated by human propaganda." "Propaganda?" Sivithra rounded on him with fire in her eyes. "Is that what you call it?" A scientist of your own species confessed on camera. A woman who has been missing for 8 years, who may have been captured and forced to say anything the humans wanted. Morvith spread his hands in a gesture of reason. The humans have had 15 years to prepare this deception. We cannot simply believe everything they show us. "Then, let us verify," Sivithra said. "Come to the quarantine line with me. Face the humans and examine the evidence for yourself. Unless you're afraid of what we'll find." Morvith hesitated for just a moment. That hesitation was enough. "He is afraid," the Marvathi representative said. "I can see it in his form. His patterns are those of fear and deception." "This is absurd," Morvith said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I am the High Chancellor of the Krethvani people. I will not be accused by whom?" Sivithra stepped closer to him. "By the species you murdered? By the people you used as cover for your crimes? My world is dead, High Chancellor. 3 billion of my people are dead. And now I learn that they died because you wanted to eliminate a rival? I had nothing to do with Lo-I-A-R." The word echoed through the corridor. Every being in the crowd took a step back as Sivithra's bioluminescence flared to blinding intensity. She was beautiful and terrible in her rage, a creature of light and fury. "I smelled the ashes of my homeworld," she said, her voice now quiet and deadly. "I held the bodies of my children as they died from the weapons you created. I wept for justice, and you gave me lies. You pointed at the humans and I believed you because I needed someone to blame." Tears of liquid light streamed down her face. 15 years, she continued. 15 years I have hated the wrong species. 15 years I have celebrated the suffering of innocent people. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Do you have any concept of the guilt I will carry for the rest of my life? Morvith said nothing. There was nothing he could say. "I'm going to the quarantine line," Sivithra announced to the crowd. "I'm going to see what the humans have built. I'm going to examine the evidence for myself. Anyone who wants the truth is welcome to join me." She turned and began walking toward the docking bays. Behind her, beings of every species began to follow. The Morvathi, the Yinishi, the Drelmori, even some of the smaller Krethvani delegations, those who had suspected for years that something was wrong with their leadership. Morvith watched them go with growing desperation. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. The lies that had sustained him for 15 years were dissolving like mist in sunlight. He activated his personal communicator. "This is High Chancellor Morvith. I am declaring a state of emergency. All Krethvani military vessels are to proceed immediately to the Seoul quarantine line. The human fleet must be destroyed before it can spread any more of its lies." There was a long pause. Then a voice responded. "High Chancellor, we are receiving your order, but there is a problem. Several of our allied species are requesting that we stand down. They want to investigate the human evidence before any military action is taken. I don't care what they want. I am giving you a direct order. Sir, if we attack the humans now, we will be in violation of Concord law. We will be proving that we have something to hide." Morvith gripped the communicator so hard that the casing cracked. "And if we don't attack, the truth will come out. With respect, High Chancellor, I believe the truth is already coming out." The connection went silent. Morvith stood alone in the corridor, surrounded by empty space where the crowd had been. He had spent his entire career building power and influence. He had manipulated and murdered his way to the highest position in the Concord. He had believed himself untouchable. Now everything was falling apart. The journey to the quarantine line took 3 days. A fleet of ships from a dozen different species made the trip, led by the Valorian vessel Morning Star with High Mourner Sivithra at its head. Behind them, the Krethvani military followed at a distance, uncertain of their orders, unsure of what to do. When they arrived at the coordinates the humans had provided, they found something that should not have existed. 700 ships hung in the darkness beyond the Ur cloud. They were sleek and powerful, designs that no Concord database recognized. They moved with perfect coordination, thousands of vessels acting as one. And at the head of the formation, the flagship TSS Prometheus awaited. "Attention Concord fleet," came a transmission from the human ships. "This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Sovereignty Navy. We have been expecting you. Director Driscoll invites your representatives to come aboard and examine our evidence in person. You have nothing to fear from us. We are seeking justice, not war." Sivithra responded before anyone else could speak. "This is High Mourner Sivithra. I accept your invitation. I'm coming aboard alone." "High Mourner, that may not be wise," the Morvathi representative cautioned. "We don't know what the humans are planning." "I know exactly what they're planning," Sivithra replied. "They're planning to tell me the truth. It's something I should have heard 15 years ago." Her shuttle launched from the Morning Star and crossed the distance between the fleets. The human ships parted to let her through, an honor guard of destroyers and cruisers escorting her to the Prometheus. When Sivithra stepped onto the human flagship, she was met by an old woman with gray hair and eyes that burned with controlled fire. They stood face to face for a long moment, two beings who should have been enemies, but had been made into something else by Krethvani lies. "High Mourner," Kalen Driscoll said. "Thank you for coming." "I needed to see for myself," Sivithra replied. "I needed to know if the evidence was real." "It's real." "All of it. We have more than what we showed in the broadcast. Documents, recordings, physical evidence. Enough to prove beyond any doubt what the Krethvani did." Sivithra's bioluminescence flickered with pain. "And what do you want from us? Revenge? Reparations? The destruction of those who wronged you?" Kalen shook her head. "We want justice. A fair trial for the Krethvani leadership under Concord law. Reparations for your people, paid from Krethvani coffers. And an apology, broadcast to every world in the galaxy, acknowledging that humanity was innocent. That's all?" "That's all. We're not here to become what you accused us of being. We built this fleet for defense, not conquest. We gathered this evidence for truth, not revenge." Sivithra studied the human woman for a long moment. She was trying to find the deception, the hidden agenda, the real purpose behind the reasonable words. But she found nothing, only determination and a strange kind of peace. "You've had 15 years to hate us," Sivithra said finally. 15 years of suffering and exile. "And you don't want to destroy us for what we did? Would destroying you bring back the dead? Would it undo the suffering? Would it prove that we're better than what you accused us of being?" Kalen shook her head again. "Revenge is easy. Justice is hard. We chose the hard path." She extended her hand to the Valorian leader. "Blood is stronger than lies, High Mourner. The blood of your people cries out for justice. So does ours. Help us give them that justice. Help us make things right." Sivithra looked at the extended hand. It was a human gesture of peace, one that she had learned about during her years on the Concord, but had never experienced herself. Such a simple thing. An offer of connection between two beings who had every reason to hate each other. She took the hand. "Show me the evidence," she said. "Show me everything. And in the darkness beyond the quarantine line, surrounded by ships that should not have existed, the first step toward justice was taken. Behind them, the Krethvani fleet waited in uncertainty. High Chancellor Morvith watched from his command ship as his enemies became allies, as his lies unraveled, as everything he had built collapsed around him. The reckoning had come at last. The examination of the evidence took 12 hours. High Mourner Sivithra sat in the Prometheus's conference room, surrounded by holographic displays that told the story of how her world had died. She watched communications between Krethvani military commanders. She studied laboratory footage of biological weapons being tested on Valorian tissue samples. She read financial documents that tracked the profits the Krethvani had made from Valorian territories after the genocide. The human woman, Director Driscoll, sat across from her in silence. She did not try to explain or interpret the evidence. She simply let Sivithra see it for herself. When it was over, Sivithra sat motionless for a long time. Her bioluminescence had faded to almost nothing. She looked old and broken in a way she had never appeared before. "We were allies," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Krethvani and my people traded together for 1,000 years. We shared technology and culture. Some of us even had children together." She looked up at Kalen with eyes full of pain. How could they do this to us? How could they murder everyone I ever loved, just to blame someone else? Kalen answered carefully. Power makes some beings do terrible things. The Krethvani saw humanity as a future threat. They saw your world as an opportunity. They convinced themselves that the crime was worth it because it would benefit their people in the long run. Benefit them. Sivithra's voice turned bitter. They murdered 3 billion souls and called it a benefit. Yes, and now they will answer for it. Sivithra rose from her chair and walked to the viewport. Outside, the combined fleet of Concord species hung in formation alongside the human ships. More vessels had arrived over the past 12 hours as news of the evidence spread. Species that had condemned humanity were now demanding to see the proof for themselves. "I owe you an apology," Sivithra said without turning around. "Not just me. All of us. We condemned you without truly investigating. We watched you suffer and told ourselves it was justice. We were wrong. You were lied to," Kalen replied. The evidence the Krethvani presented was convincing. Anyone would have believed it. But we should not have believed so easily. We should have questioned. We should have demanded more investigation. Sivithra finally turned to face Kalen. "I wanted someone to blame for my pain. The Krethvani gave me a target, and I accepted it without hesitation. That is my shame, Director. That is what I will carry for the rest of my days." Kalen stood and approached the Valorian leader. What happened cannot be undone. But what happens next is still within our control. The Krethvani leadership must face trial for their crimes. Your people deserve that justice. So do mine. And what of the ordinary Krethvani? The ones who knew nothing of this conspiracy. They are innocent. Collective punishment is what was done to us. We will not repeat that mistake. Sivithra nodded slowly. The fire was returning to her eyes. The grief was still there, but it was being joined by something else. Purpose. "I will speak to the other Concord species," she said. "I will tell them what I have seen. The Krethvani must be held accountable, but only those who are actually guilty. Thank you, High Mourner." "No," Sivithra shook her head. "Thank you, Director. For 15 years, you had every reason to hate us. You could have built weapons capable of destroying our worlds. You could have planned revenge. Instead, you built ships of defense and gathered evidence of truth. That is not what monsters do." She extended her hand in the human gesture of peace. Kalen took it. "We were wrong about you," Sivithra said. "We were very wrong." The Concord fleet gathered for a council of war. Representatives from every species crowded into the conference room of the Marvathi flagship, where the evidence could be displayed for all to see. Kalen was invited to attend as humanity's representative. The first time a human had been welcome in Concord discussions in 15 years. The mood in the room was tense. Some species were convinced of Krethvani guilt. Others were still uncertain. And in one corner of the room, the Krethvani delegation sat in hostile silence, refusing to acknowledge the evidence against them. "This is clearly a fabrication," High Chancellor Morvath declared when given the chance to speak. "The humans have spent 15 years creating false evidence to frame my people for their own crimes." The same argument could be made in reverse, the Marvathi representative pointed out. "You claimed the humans had committed genocide. Now they claim you did. The difference is that their evidence is far more comprehensive and verifiable." Verifiable by whom? Human scientists? Human intelligence agents? Verifiable by Velshira, Sivithra said coldly. "A scientist of your own species who has confirmed every detail. Or do you claim she is also a human fabrication?" Morvath's black eyes flickered with rage. "Velshira is a traitor who was clearly corrupted by human influence. Her testimony cannot be trusted." "Then explain the financial records," another representative demanded. "Explain how Krethvani corporations acquired Valorian territories within weeks of the genocide. Explain the communications between your military officers. Explain the laboratory footage. Falsified. All of it." The room erupted into arguments. Species shouted at each other across the conference table. The carefully maintained unity of the Concord was shattering under the weight of revealed truth. Kalen waited for the noise to die down, then spoke for the first time. "I understand your uncertainty. The Krethvani are asking you to believe that everything you're seeing is a lie. But consider this question. If we had the ability to create such sophisticated false evidence, why didn't we do it 15 years ago? Why did we wait until now?" The room fell silent. "We waited because we didn't have the proof then," Kalen continued. "It took us 15 years to gather this evidence. 15 years of patient work by agents who risked their lives. 15 years of cultivating contacts among species the Krethvani had exploited. 15 years of building the technology to reveal the truth." She looked directly at Morvath. "If we had the ability to fabricate evidence on this scale, we would have used it immediately. We would not have suffered in exile while developing capabilities we already possessed. The very existence of this evidence proves it is real." Morvath met her gaze with cold fury. "Pretty words from a desperate species. Perhaps. But I notice you haven't actually refuted any of the evidence. You've only claimed it's false without providing any proof. I don't need to prove anything. The burden of proof is on the accuser." "No," Sivithra said, standing from her seat. "The burden of proof was on you 15 years ago when you accused humanity. You provided evidence, and we believed it. Now humanity has provided evidence, and I believe them." She looked around the room at the gathered representatives. "I call for a vote. The Concord should demand that High Chancellor Morvath and the Krethvani leadership surrender themselves for trial. All those in favor?" Hands and appendages and energy fields rose around the room. The Marvathi, the Yinishi, the Drelmori. Species after species voted in favor of the motion. When the count was finished, only the Krethvani themselves had voted against. "The motion carries," the tribunal speaker announced. "High Chancellor Morvath, you and your military leadership are hereby ordered to surrender for trial before the Galactic Concord. How do you respond?" Morvath stood slowly. His face was a mask of cold rage, but beneath it, Kalen could see the calculation of a being who had run out of options. "The Krethvani do not recognize the authority of this corrupted body," he said. "We will not surrender to a trial based on fabricated evidence and the testimony of traitors." Any attempt to force our compliance will be met with military resistance." He turned and walked out of the room. His delegation followed. The silence that remained was heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. "He means to fight," Admiral Tanaka said quietly. Kalen nodded. "He knows that surrender means death. His only hope is that the Krethvani military can defeat us before the truth spreads any further." "Can they? Alone? No. The Krethvani have always relied on Concord support for their military strength. But if other species join them—" She let the sentence trail off. Sivithra spoke up. "The Valorian fleet will fight with humanity. This is not even a question." The trial of High Chancellor Morvith lasted 3 months. It was held on Axis Prime, in the same tribunal chamber where humanity had been condemned 16 years earlier. Representatives from every species in the galaxy watched as evidence was presented. Witnesses testified, and the truth that had been buried for so long was finally exposed to the light. Kalen Driscoll attended every session. She sat in the public gallery with other human representatives, watching silently as the case against Morvith unfolded. Sometimes she thought about the last time she had stood in this room, when she had been the accused instead of the accuser. When the galaxy had believed she was a monster. The evidence presented at trial was overwhelming. Communications, financial records, laboratory footage, and testimony from dozens of Krethvani officers who had chosen to cooperate rather than share their leader's fate. The defense tried to claim fabrication, but their arguments grew weaker with each passing day. Velshira, the defector who had helped humanity gather the evidence, testified in person. She spoke clearly and calmly about her role in the conspiracy, about the orders she had followed, about the guilt that had eventually driven her to confess. When she was finished, there was silence in the chamber. Morvith himself refused to testify. He sat in the accused's dock with cold black eyes, watching the destruction of everything he had built. Sometimes his gaze met Kellen's across the room. She saw hatred there, but also something else. Fear, perhaps, or regret. On the final day of the trial, the tribunal speaker rose to deliver the verdict. "High Chancellor Morvith of the Krethvani," she announced, her crystal body ringing with solemn weight. "This tribunal has examined the evidence against you. We have heard testimony from witnesses representing multiple species. We have reviewed documents and recordings that leave no doubt about your actions." The chamber was utterly silent. 15 years ago, you orchestrated the destruction of Valor Prime. You murdered 3 billion innocent beings. You manufactured evidence to blame humanity for your crimes. You manipulated this tribunal into condemning an innocent species to exile and suffering. Morvith's face remained expressionless, but Kalen noticed that his hands had begun to tremble. These actions constitute the most serious crimes in galactic history. They are crimes against the Valorian people, crimes against humanity, and crimes against the very principles that the Galactic Concord was built upon. On the charge of genocide, this tribunal finds you guilty. A sound rose from the gallery. Not cheering exactly, but something deeper. Relief, perhaps. The release of emotions that had been held back for 16 years. "The sentence for genocide under Concord law is death," the speaker continued. "However, this tribunal has received a petition from the Terran sovereignty regarding the manner of punishment." All eyes turned to Kalen. She rose from her seat and approached the central platform where she had once stood as the accused. "Citizens of the Concord," she said, her voice steady and clear, "the Terran sovereignty does not wish to see High Chancellor Morvith executed. We petition this tribunal to commute his sentence to life imprisonment without possibility of release." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Many beings had expected humanity to demand the harshest possible punishment. This was something else entirely. "Why?" the speaker asked. "The law permits execution. Many would say it is deserved. Kaelin looked at Morvith. The Krethvani leader was staring at her with undisguised shock. This was not what he had expected either. High Chancellor Morvith committed terrible crimes, Kaelin said. He deserves to be punished. But executing him would be too easy. Too quick. A moment of pain, and then nothing. She paused. We believe he should live. We believe he should spend the rest of his long life in a cell, knowing that his plans failed, knowing that the species he tried to destroy survived and thrived, knowing that the truth he buried was eventually revealed. She turned to face the gallery, addressing not just the tribunal, but everyone who was watching across the galaxy. Humanity was accused of genocide. We were called monsters. For 16 years, we were punished for crimes we did not commit. We had every reason to want revenge. We had the power to demand it. Her voice grew stronger. But revenge is not justice. Death is not the only form of punishment. We choose to show mercy, not because Morvith deserves it, but because showing mercy is who we are. That is what separates us from those who wronged us. The tribunal deliberated for less than an hour. When the speaker returned, she announced that humanity's petition had been granted. Morvith would spend the rest of his life in prison, stripped of rank and power, forced to watch as the galaxy moved on without him. Guards led him away. As he passed Kaelin, he stopped for just a moment. Why? He asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you demand my death? Kaelin looked at him with an expression that was almost pitying. Because that's not what the dead would want. Neither yours nor ours. They cry out for justice, High Chancellor, not blood. We've given them what they wanted. Morvith had no response. The guards led him away to begin his endless punishment, and he did not look back. The months that followed the trial were filled with change. The galactic Concord underwent a fundamental transformation. New laws were passed to prevent any species from holding too much power. Systems of checks and oversight were established. The species that had suffered under Krethvani dominance were given greater voices in galactic affairs. The Krethvani people were not punished collectively, just as humanity had insisted. The ordinary citizens who had known nothing of Morvith's conspiracy were allowed to continue their lives. Their economy was damaged by the loss of Valorian territories that were returned to survivor control. But they were not destroyed. Some voices called for harsher measures. There were beings who remembered their own suffering under Krethvani rule and demanded retribution. But humanity consistently advocated for restraint and justice over revenge. Slowly, grudgingly, the galaxy came to respect their position. Reparations were paid to the Valorian survivors. Funds flowed from Krethvani coffers to support the rebuilding of Valorian society. It would take generations to recover from the genocide, but at least now there was hope. One by one, the other species made similar declarations. The Morvathi would stand with the accusers. The Yinishi would contribute their ships. Even the smaller species, those who had always followed where the Krethvani led, announced their support for the trial. The Krethvani, it seemed, had run out of allies. The battle began 6 hours later. High Chancellor Morvith had retreated to the Krethvani military fleet, which had been waiting at the edge of the quarantine zone. 200 warships, the most powerful vessels in the Concord, prepared to fight for their leader's freedom. Against them stood the combined fleet of humanity and its new allies. 800 ships of various sizes and capabilities, unified by a common cause. All vessels, this is Admiral Tanaka, came the transmission across the Allied fleet. We have been authorized to use force to bring the Krethvani leadership to justice. Our objective is to capture, not to destroy. Disable their ships. Target their engines and weapons. Minimize casualties on both sides. These are our orders. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Kalen watched the tactical display with a mixture of tension and hope. This was the moment 15 years of preparation had built toward. Not a war of revenge, but a battle for justice. "The Krethvani fleet is moving," the tactical officer reported. "They're forming an attack pattern. All ships, engage at your discretion," Tanaka ordered. "Remember, disable, not destroy." The battle erupted across 1,000,000 kilometers of space. Energy weapons flashed in the darkness. Missiles traced lines of fire between the opposing forces. Ships maneuvered and fought with deadly precision. But something strange happened almost immediately. Half of the Krethvani fleet didn't move. Kalen watched in surprise as dozens of Krethvani vessels held position instead of joining the attack. Some even began powering down their weapon systems. "What's happening?" she asked. The communications officer looked up with wide eyes. "We're receiving transmissions from Krethvani ship's director. They're surrendering." "Surrendering? In the middle of a battle?" "They're saying they won't fight to protect criminals. They're saying the evidence is clear and the High Chancellor must face justice." It was happening. The fractures that Kalen had hoped would appear were spreading through the Krethvani military. Not all of them were willing to die for Morvith's lies. "Accept their surrenders," Kalen ordered. "Tell them they won't be harmed." The battle continued, but the outcome was now certain. With half their fleet refusing to fight, the Krethvani loyalists were hopelessly outnumbered. Human ships moved through the chaos with eerie coordination, targeting engines and weapons with surgical precision. Allied vessels provided support and cover. One by one, the Krethvani warships fell silent. The flagship of the Krethvani fleet, the Dominion of Stars, was the last to surrender. It had fought ferociously, destroying several Allied ships before its engines were finally disabled. Now it drifted in the darkness, surrounded by human vessels with weapons trained on every hatch. "Attention Dominion of Stars," Admiral Tanaka transmitted. "This is Admiral Tanaka of the Terran Sovereignty Navy. Your fleet has been defeated. Your allies have abandoned you. You have no escape. High Chancellor Morvith, you are hereby ordered to surrender yourself for trial. This is your final warning." For a long moment, there was no response. Then, Morvith's voice came across the communication channel, tired and bitter. "You think you've won, humans. You think this changes anything. The Krethvani will never accept your judgment. We will never bow to species we once ruled." "You don't have a choice," Tanaka replied calmly. "Your ship is disabled. Your crew is trapped. You can surrender peacefully, or we can breach your hull and take you by force. Either way, you're coming with us." Another pause. Then, slowly the Dominion's airlocks began to open. Surrender signals appeared on the tactical display. "All ships, move to boarding positions," Tanaka ordered. "Marines, prepare for hull entry." The assault teams were made up of humans and Valorians together. They moved through the Dominion's corridors with weapons ready, securing each section before moving on. Most of the Krethvani crew surrendered without resistance. They had seen the evidence. They knew the truth. They had no desire to die for a leader who had dragged them into this disaster. Maya Rodriguez, the young woman Kalen had met on Mars, was among the first through the door to the command deck. She was a lieutenant now, having earned her rank through years of training and preparation. When she stepped onto the bridge, she found High Chancellor Morvith standing alone at the central console. He looked old. All the cold confidence had drained from his face, replaced by the exhaustion of a being who had finally run out of lies. "High Chancellor Morvith," Maya announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "By order of the Galactic Concord and the Terran Sovereignty, you are under arrest for the crime of genocide against the Valorian people." Morvith looked at her with dull black eyes. "I should have destroyed your species completely. I should have ensured there were none of you left to seek revenge. This isn't revenge, Maya replied. This is justice. There's a difference. She nodded to the soldiers behind her. They moved forward with restraints. You're making a mistake, Morvis said as the restraints were locked around his wrists. The Krethvani will not accept this. There will be war. There was already war, Maya said. You just lost it. She led him off the bridge, past rows of his own officers who looked away in shame, toward the airlock where a human shuttle waited to take him to the Prometheus. The corridors of his own flagship became the path to his judgment. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Kalen watched the tactical display as the last pockets of resistance were neutralized. The battle was over. The Krethvani leadership was in custody. Justice, at long last, was within reach. Admiral Tanaka approached her with a tired smile. We did it, Director. 15 years of preparation, and it actually worked. The hard part is still ahead, Kalen replied. Now, we have to prove that we meant what we said. That we're seeking justice, not revenge. That we're worthy of the respect we were denied. You don't think we've earned that already? Kalen shook her head slowly. We've proven that we're capable, strong, determined. But being worthy of respect means more than winning battles. It means how we treat our enemies after we've beaten them. It means the choices we make when we have power over those who wronged us. She watched as the shuttle carrying Morvith docked with the Prometheus. The galaxy is watching us right now. They're waiting to see if we become the monsters they thought we were. We have to show them something different. Something better. Tanaka nodded in understanding. What happens to Morvith? A fair trial. Full presentation of evidence. A chance to defend himself, even though we all know he's guilty. That's what justice looks like. That's what we fought for. The doors to the bridge opened, and Maya Rodriguez entered with her prisoner. Morvith's black eyes found Kalen immediately, filled with hatred and defeated fury. Director Driscoll, he said. We meet again. Kalen looked at the being who had caused so much suffering, who had murdered billions, who had condemned humanity to 15 years of exile and pain. She felt anger, certainly. She felt the temptation of revenge. But she also felt something else. Peace. High Chancellor Morvith, she said calmly. You are now a prisoner of the Terran sovereignty. You will be treated according to Concord law, which includes the right to a fair trial. Do you understand these rights? This is absurd, Morvith spat. You cannot try me under laws I do not recognize. The Concord recognized those laws when they condemned humanity. They will recognize them when they condemn you. That is how justice works. She nodded to Maya. Take him to the detention area. Make sure he's comfortable. Comfortable? Maya asked in surprise. He's our prisoner, not our victim. We don't torture. We don't abuse. We treat him exactly as the law requires. Kalen met Maya's eyes with a steady gaze. That's what separates us from him. Maya understood. She led Morvith away without another word. Kalen turned back to the viewport. Outside, the combined fleet was organizing itself for the journey home. Ships of a dozen different species flew alongside human vessels, united by a common purpose. It wasn't over yet. The trial would be difficult. There would be those who demanded harsher punishment. There would be those who refused to accept Krethvani guilt. There would be challenges and conflicts in the months and years ahead. But for now, in this moment, humanity had proven something to the galaxy. They had been wronged. They had been punished for crimes they did not commit. They had suffered in exile for 15 years. And when they finally had the power to take revenge, they chose justice instead. That was worth more than any victory in battle. That was the kind of strength that would earn the respect of the stars. The reckoning was complete. The future awaited, and humanity was formally reinstated as a member of the Reformed Galactic Concord. The ceremony took place 1 year after the trial's conclusion. Kaylin Driscoll stood before the tribunal once more, but this time she stood as an honored guest rather than an accused criminal. She wore the formal robes of an ambassador, the same robes she had worn on the day of the verdict 16 years ago. The gallery was packed with beings from every species. Many of them had watched her condemnation all those years before. Now they watched her vindication. Citizens of the Concord, the tribunal speaker announced, "We are gathered here today to formally reinstate the Terran sovereignty as a full member of this body. 16 years ago, humanity was wrongly condemned for crimes they did not commit. They were exiled, isolated, and left to suffer. Today, we acknowledge that wrong and welcome them back among us." Kaylin stepped forward to accept the certificate of membership. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it. This piece of paper represented everything her people had fought for, everything they had sacrificed. "On behalf of the Terran sovereignty," she said, "I accept this honor. We are grateful for the opportunity to rejoin the community of civilized species. We look forward to contributing to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy." The gallery applauded. It was a strange sound to Kellen's ears. 16 years ago, this same room had cheered for humanity's destruction. Now it cheered for their return. After the ceremony, High Mourner Sivithra approached Kaylin in the corridor outside the tribunal chamber. The Valorian leader looked older than she had a year ago. The weight of everything that had happened showed in her eyes and in the dimness of her bioluminescent glow. "Ambassador Driscoll," she said, "I wanted to speak with you privately." "Of course, High Mourner. What's on your mind?" Sivithra was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I have been thinking about what you said at the trial. About mercy, about being better than those who wronged you." Kaylin nodded but said nothing. "When I first learned the truth about Valor Prime, I wanted the Krethvani to suffer. I wanted their worlds to burn the way mine had burned. I wanted them to feel the same pain I had felt for 16 years. Sivithra's voice trembled. "But you didn't give me that. You gave me something else instead. What did I give you? A different kind of justice. One that doesn't require becoming the thing you hate." Sivithra's eyes met Kellen's. "I didn't understand at first. I thought you were weak. I thought you were afraid to demand proper punishment. But now I see that it takes more strength to show mercy than to take revenge." She reached out and took Kellen's hands in her own. Her skin was cool and smooth, pulsing with faint light. "Thank you," Sivithra said simply, "for showing me a better way, for helping me become something other than a creature of rage and grief." Kaylin felt tears prick at her eyes. This was why they had chosen the path they did. Not for political advantage or strategic gain, but because it was right. Because mercy and justice were stronger than hate. "We learned something during our exile," Kaylin said. "Hatred is easy. It comes naturally to beings who have been hurt. But hatred destroys the one who carries it faster than any weapon. We chose to build instead of hate. We chose to prove instead of rage. We chose to be better than what we were accused of being. And if the Concord had attacked you when you revealed yourselves, if the whole galaxy had turned its weapons on Sol," Kaylin smiled sadly, "then we would have fought. And we would have died fighting if necessary. But we would have died knowing that we had not become monsters. That is worth something?" Sivithra nodded slowly. "The most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one that strikes first." "No," Kaylin agreed. "It's the one that survives. The one that remembers. The one that turns its pain into purpose." She squeezed Sivithra's hands gently. "Blood is stronger than lies, High Mourner. The Krethvani forgot that. We never did. Our blood remembered what was true, even when the whole galaxy believed what was false. And now the truth has set us all free. They stood together in silence for a long moment. Two beings who had every reason to hate each other, but had found something else instead. Understanding, respect, perhaps even friendship. Outside the viewport behind them, ships from a dozen species flew in formation. Human vessels alongside Valorian cruisers, alongside Morvathi crystal ships. The galaxy was changed now, scarred by what had happened, but also healing, growing, getting better. The weeks and months after the ceremony saw humanity taking its place in galactic society once more. Human traders returned to alien markets. Human diplomats participated in Concord discussions. Human scientists shared the technologies they had developed during their exile. Advancements that amazed species who had thought humanity was dying in isolation. But the most important change was less visible. Throughout the galaxy, on worlds that the Concord had forgotten or rejected, beings began to look at humanity differently. The species that had been enslaved by the Krethvani, the ones who had been denied membership in the Concord, the political dissidents and refugees and outcasts. They had watched what happened. They had seen humanity falsely accused and condemned. They had seen humanity survive and grow strong in exile. And they had seen humanity choose justice over revenge. When they finally had the power to choose, these beings began to reach out, to make contact, to form alliances that had nothing to do with the Concord's formal structures. Maya Rodriguez, now a captain in the Terran Sovereignty Navy, noticed it first. Her ship was assigned to patrol the outer regions of human space, where the boundaries between civilized territory and the unknown were blurred. "We're getting a lot of visitors," she reported to Admiral Tanaka. "Species we've never seen before. They say they heard about what we did. They want to learn more about us." Tanaka smiled. "And what do you tell them?" "The truth. That we're not perfect. That we make mistakes. But that we try to be better. That we believe in justice and mercy and treating others the way we want to be treated." Maya paused. "They seem to like that. They say they haven't met many species who actually believe those things. Then perhaps we're teaching them something. Maybe, or maybe they're teaching us. Either way, we're making friends. Good friends. The kind that will stand with us if things get difficult again." Tanaka nodded with satisfaction. "That's exactly what Director Driscoll planned, you know? She always said that the real victory wouldn't come from weapons or technology. It would come from earning the respect of beings who had given up on finding anyone worth respecting." Maya thought about that. She thought about the old woman who had led humanity through its darkest years, who had never lost faith that the truth would eventually prevail. "Where's Director Driscoll now?" she asked. "Retired. She's living on Mars, in a small house near Prometheus Base. She says she wants to spend whatever time she has left watching the children play. The children who will grow up in a galaxy where humanity is respected instead of feared." Maya smiled at that image. It seemed right somehow. The woman who had fought for so long finally finding peace. Director Kaylin Driscoll sat on the porch of her small house, watching the sunset over the Martian landscape. She was 70 years old now, her body tired from decades of stress and struggle. But her mind was still sharp, and her heart was at peace. The garden in front of her was filled with plants from Earth, engineered to survive in the thin Martian atmosphere. Roses and lavender and herbs that reminded her of a planet she had not visited in many years. She spent her days tending them, watching them grow. Thinking about all that had happened, a group of children ran past the house, laughing and shouting as they played some game whose rules Kaylin couldn't quite understand. They were the first generation born after the exile. They had never known the fear and shame that had marked their parents' lives. They were growing up in a galaxy that respected humanity, that welcomed them among the stars. One of the children, A girl with dark hair and bright eyes stopped and waved at Kalen. "Hi, Director," she called. Kalen waved back. "Hello, little one. Having fun?" "Yes. We're playing Explorers. I'm the captain of a starship." "A captain already? That's wonderful. What are you exploring?"